All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final panel of Where Can I Go with a Music Degree? It has been a fantastic weekend. Thanks to everybody who's participated for your wonderful questions, for your engagement and your curiosity. I know I've learned a lot from all of these panelists, and I'm feeling very inspired, so I hope that you are too. Without further ado, we're going to jump into our final discussion, which is called The True Value of a Music Education. This will be hosted by myself, Lara Deutsch, and my colleagues, Dr. Amy Hillis of York University and Dr. Cindy Tong of Acadia, who you probably know by now. And most excitingly, we'll feature a person that we all know and love, whose voice has guided us home on many car rides, many afternoons listening to music. We'd like to welcome Tom Allen from CBC Radio. I know many of my drives, long drives to high school, every day was listening to your program. And a lot of what you've said has inspired a lot of what I think about music and helped me to discover many artists and composers I wouldn't have known otherwise. So thank you for that, Tom.
It's a great compliment. Thank you.
So many of us know you, of course, from CBC, but you have so many other things that you do. You're an author, you're a storyteller, you do these chamber musicals. I saw something in your bio about a brief stint on Wall Street. Just to get things kicked off, can you tell us a little bit about your trajectory as, starting out in classical trombone to how you got into broadcasting and to how you developed your career into all of these other facets?
Okay. Thanks, by the way, and congratulations on what must be considered a giant success with this conference. It's a great thing you did.
Thank you.
And thanks for including me. So I started playing trombone in high school. I didn't come from a musical family. My parents loved music. They were a church family, so there was a lot of music around me because of that. But I went to Montreal West High School, which was not a sterling music program. We had a very devoted band teacher to whom I'm eternally indebted, Barbara Hunter. But along the way, I went to a summer band camp and fell in love with the idea of playing the trombone and got very serious about it. I mean, I think for a lot of people, I was 16 when I started really working at it. And I think when you're that age, to have someone expect you to work hard at something, to be challenged is thrilling. Because until then you've been a kid and the world doesn't expect you to take things seriously. So there was that. It was something to just dive into. And I went to McGill through Marianopolis College, and then I transferred to Boston University after a summer program there, and got into NYO when I was 21, which was a huge life-changing experience. And did a master's degree at Yale, really just following the conductor who was conducting the NYO that summer, Otto Werner Müller. And he was teaching at Yale, so I went there. And along the way, I really had climbed up to the goal of being a bass trombonist in a symphony orchestra. And really, if I was really honest, somewhere around there, probably 18, it was the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. That, I don't think I would have put up with anything else at that point in my life.
The number of panelists who have said something similar to that is astounding.
Yeah. So, and I do remember a conversation with my friend Colin Murray, who was a fellow student at McGill, about our teacher, Ted Griffith, who played in the Montreal Symphony. And I was like, oh, I got to play in the Chicago Symphony. And he was like, and he was a little bit older than me. He's like, I think Ted's got a pretty good thing there. He's playing in a pretty good orchestra. He gets to live in Montreal. Like, he's pretty happy. That was the first time that there was any indication that maybe this fantasy I'd built for myself wasn't necessarily what I thought. Anyway, I moved to New York to freelance. I was playing in a brass quintet that started with the National Youth Orchestra, the Great Lakes Brass. And that was a really inspiring thing. And I loved it because it was a communal effort that we all did a lot of different things to make it happen. So that was an indication, which I honestly didn't heed at the time, that my ambition was fueled by diversity of activity. So in the brass quintet, I got to write arrangements. I got to make sales calls. I worked out a corporate deal with an airline for a sponsorship, and it was all this stuff which I really liked. I also, somewhere around there, probably not, honestly, I graduated with my master's degree in 1985. And if I'm honest with myself, by 1987, I was starting to flag in my unyielding devotion to that one idea. It was really hard I didn't really want to admit. I had trouble facing the truth that maybe this thing that had become my identity for a decade wasn't what I thought it was. And I always think of the phrase, I didn't say to people, I play the trombone. I want to get a job in a symphony orchestra. I said, I am a trombonist. It was what I was. And so the idea that maybe it wasn't what I was frankly terrifying. And I really had a hard time for the last year or year and a half that I was in the quintet because I wasn't practicing very much. I started not sounding as good.
Mhm.
And it's not a job you can do without all your heart, but my body was trying to tell me I had other interests. And so after a couple of really difficult gigs where I just didn't sound any good at all, and even I couldn't ignore that anymore, I left the quintet and I started to reassess my future. While I was touring with the brass quintet, because brass players get tired, that's really the reason that whole shtick of telling stories like the Canadian brass do so well. It really has a functional purpose, is to let your chops rest. And I really enjoyed that, and I was really good at it. I think, if I can say that, I felt
You
comfortable.
are, can confirm.
Anyway, I mean, and I saw last night in Peterborough at the Peterborough Symphony, Mike Newnham, who conducts that orchestra, he was in the NYO with me when we were both 21. And he said, you were always doing that. That was always you. And I didn't know. So, so I started working on writing. My dad gave me a book, which I believe is still in print, called What Color is Your Parachute? It's a job changer's manual, and it was really well done. And there were all these charts and things, and I filled out all these, did all the work, and it pointed really clearly to radio. And I by then published a freelance piece in the Toronto Star, a little humor piece that I was thrilled people bought. And and I went to the CBC because I had friends who had been their producers who had hired us as in the quintet, and said, I think I might be interested in this. And so through those connections, I got a freelance opportunity to write a piece. And 6 months later, I got a job. Like it was a really clear endorsement that I was right, that this is the thing that came most easily to me. So it
Which is
wasn't, and it wasn't perfect from there, but it was a good career. And the interesting thing is ultimately, with the chamber musicals that my wife, Lori Gemmel, she was a harpist, that she and I put together, I'm kind of doing the same thing I was doing in the quintet. I'm playing the trombone, not as much, and certainly not as well, but I still play. I'm writing some arrangements. I'm writing stories. I'm creating shows, and I'm selling shows, and all that business work, which I find really thrilling, really stimulating. So it was really just, I think in the long run, it's just a question of looking at what it is that your life or your body or your ambition is telling you want to do and believing it. Like that was the hardest thing, was listening to what my life was telling me. It took about 2 whole years before I finally thought, okay, maybe this isn't what I thought I was, maybe this isn't the thing I thought it was going to be. And it didn't have to be terrible. Didn't have.
It's so powerful to hear you say that, because a lot of our panelists, without being prompted, have echoed the same thing. And especially people who play wind or brass instruments, you're kind of told this is the one thing that you can do. You don't really see any other options. So you start to believe, okay, this is my life's passion. This is what I want to do. And it becomes really difficult at a certain point when you start to grapple with, like, do I even really want to do this? Is this ever what I wanted? But just because you haven't seen all those different avenues of success and of things that you can do, you feel like you're going to be a failure because you're doing something different than what other people are doing. And that's
And,
that's
and
what
I,
I'm hearing
I
from
also
you.
think there's something kind of intoxicating or reassuring about a very specific goal. When you're 16 or 17 or whatever, maybe younger, if you see this thing, that point of arrival, I think there's something reassuring about saying that's what I'm going to do, rather than the truth, which is I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what I like, and I'm going to see where it takes me. But for some people in that early stage of adulthood, that's really scary, to not know where the end of where the destination is. So for me, I had this really specific goal, and I think it's also a product of the time. I think music schools are changing now, only just recently, but until recently, they were built on the same kind of industrial model that came out of the post-war generation, when there was lots and lots of work for musicians, for wind and brass players, big bands and jingles and film scores. And there was just every city had it didn't necessarily mean you were guaranteed success, but there was quite a bit of demand. And it meant that you could conceivably be a person who said, I'm not just a trombone player, but I'm a commercial trombone player. I play lead trombone, like these ridiculously specific. And that's from my work in music history, that's never, ever been true before.
Yeah.
Never. If you look at, I mean, the show that I'm touring now about J.S. Bach walking to Lubeck, that there's a lot written about the church where Dietrich Buxtehude was organist in Lubeck. Those musicians played, each of them, 7 or 8 instruments. They all did. That's what was expected. And cool, and some of them, like the guy who played the trumpet was also the watchman, and Buxtehude was the guy who hired the roofers to fix the church. Like this idea that this is all we do is make the perfect sound on our instrument, that's never been true. And it's a kind of a prison, really.
Yeah, it's a very refreshing and affirming perspective. And as somebody who knows, this changing role of music in society, I'm gonna pass it over to Cindy for a second because she actually teaches a course on this, so I know she has some questions about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so as thanks for sharing your thoughts, Tom. We're so excited to have you here. So as Lara mentioned, I teach a class on this very topic, music and society. It's called Music and Society at Acadia, and I'm really curious what you believe is the role of music in society from the number of perspectives and experiences that you've had. Just the way it can integrate itself into the fabric of our daily lives, and what your thoughts are on its impact.
Wow, that's a huge
Sorry.
question. Okay, it's a great question. What is the role of music in society? I think, like, right away, I think of a few very different answers. I mean, it does function as a status symbol. It's not something that we necessarily like about that, but it has always, I mean, I don't know, always, anyway, for the last 500 years, let's say, at least, having the ability to make music has meant that you are someone who can sell that capacity to people of wealth who like to have good music around, or who like to look like the kinds of people who have good music around. And so that has brought with it many complications that we have to sort of sort through. So that's one, and that's kind of a cynical role. On the other hand, I'm working on a program now with the Garneau Quartet from Edmonton, and Laurie, my wife, who's a harpist, and Nicole Lizet is writing a piece about the foundation of melody in speech that predates language, so that melodic gestures are the fundamental communication tool, along with facial expressions and movements between mothers and infants that date back to our pre-human evolution. So it's one of the reasons that it's a kind of very long-winded answer to the question, why does music give us goosebumps? It's always puzzled me. Goosebumps are essentially the same as a cat getting frightened and puffing out their hair to defend themselves. It's the same thing. So why does music make us want to defend ourselves? And I believe it is because it relates to our most vulnerable state, our infant state, where, unlike a horse or a deer, that can run away when they're a couple of hours old, a human infant is completely helpless, completely dependent for at least 3 years, more like 4 or 5, really. And so that sound of a caring caregiver, these little arcs of melody that tell us I'm safe, or I'm going to be fed, and that communication goes to the most primitive part of our brains. So in a modern application of that would be, just this morning, I met a woman who happened to be listening to the show that we did on the morning of September 12th, 2001, when we suddenly realized that music had a function now. It wasn't just pleasant music to help you through the day, that the whole world had stopped, in the Western world anyway, and people were in shock and fear, and that music actually could do something really real, could provide this kind of solace, could speak to our terrified animal brains. And so we chose a playlist that day. We just threw everything out and picked music in the moment, was Mark Steinmetz and me. And it was, very exciting in that moment. But we've heard, well, that's, more than 20 years ago. And I've heard from people right up to today that it did something for them, because that's what music can do. Music can reach us at our most terrified, most vulnerable state. So somewhere between being a cynical status symbol and the sound of maternal love, and a whole bunch of places between.
It's like where you land in the middle. I'm curious, so what kind, to follow up on that, because it's really digging deep into the crux of what it means to us as humans. What do you feel like are the implications and takeaways for this at a societal level?
Sorry, takeaways from what?
Kind of this vulnerability, this
Oh,
ability to connect, and
yeah. Well, I think it means what we do is pretty important. It can do really, really important things. It can connect people on a subconscious level, and it can. I mean, I know that some music schools have started to have adjoining music therapy programs, and there are community music wings that are, making an effort to try to join larger sectors of society, people, in various ways with music. It's a kind of health. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but Johannes Kepler had this theory of music of the spheres, the idea that that the planetary bodies are spinning and creating a vibration, and that you need to be in harmony with that. So I don't know if I follow that literally, but there is an idea that I think a real idea that music can have a connecting role that can be part of a healthy societal life. That if we can, as musicians, can allow ourselves to see what we do as being a way to connect people, it does reach us on a really profoundly deep level.
No, thank you so much. And I think it's really important for people to hear that too, because it can be easy to forget that aspect, that very fundamental aspect of it when you're in a practice room, or there's just so many other responsibilities involved in kind of juggling this role as a musician, whatever activities that may entail. I think I'll pass it over to Amy, who has some other questions related to this.
Thanks, Cindy, for asking that. I'm thrilled with the idea of your course. I'd like to know more about it. That's great that course exists.
Thanks, Tom, for being here. Yeah, I could ask questions to you all day because your answers are so stimulating. And just tying on this idea of the what is music education, I think that can be something that's quite narrow-minded, but then also something that, even just what you were talking about, the fact that what you do in your own storytelling strategies and ways, whether it be in live performance or in live radio, you give people a music education just through your storytelling, through what you say, and maybe that's what people refer to as music appreciation. It doesn't really matter, but I guess what I'm getting at is music education can mean a lot of things. So I appreciate your thoughts on that and its role in society. Maybe I'll go to the more formal music education perspective, and I'll just ask you, from your perspective as someone who did a degree, multiple degrees in music, what do you think is the role of music education, specifically today? So specifically in 2024, because I'm sure it's probably changed. But in today's world, what is the value? What is the real value of a music education?
Okay, so that's the great question. There are a bunch of different answers. On one sort of practical level, learning to play music at a high level. Oh no! Oh no! There, my phone invaded our talk. Sorry. Sorry. So, are we still okay here? We're technically connected?
We're totally fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. On a practical level, the things you learn from a music education can be used in many, 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 many different directions. So back to the brass quintet that I was in the very beginning of my career. I ended up in broadcasting and doing what I'm doing. One of our trumpet players works as a trumpet player. She plays in Stratford, Mary J. She plays in Hamilton Phil. Another, Trent Sandheim was one of the first trumpet players. He got a job in the Quebec Symphony. So he did the thing that we all thought we were going to do. And he's still there, plays second trumpet in Quebec. Then when he left, Guy Few replaced him. And Guy has had this whole journey as a soloist, as a pianist, as a trumpet player and a singer. And John Jowett, who played tenor trombone, started a music school for people with developmental handicaps. And that has been an amazing achievement in Toronto. And he also plays in a bunch of bands in town. And Lise Vaugeois, the French horn player, is now the MPP for Thunder Bay. She was elected just about a year ago, I guess. So if you look at that cross-section of careers, we all had roughly the same kind of music education. And it taught us, well, finding consensus. It taught us to negotiate. It taught us to understand what we wanted to do. It taught us what quality was, what was acceptable. It taught us how to explain and connect with an audience, what it was we wanted to accomplish. It taught us how to survive, because we all had to do different things in order to pay the rent. So I think at its best, a music education teaches you to think. It teaches you an appreciation of art and beauty and history, and it teaches you to work. Teaches you how to work and how to think, how to adapt. I mean, my dad was a businessman. He used to say the only job security is knowing you can do something else, and which I thought was a great thing, because when you play music, you almost always have to do something else. So I think it's really important for a music education to not just teach you all of those abilities, but to be frank about the fact that this is what you're learning. You're not learning to be, maybe you are learning to be principal trumpet in the Chicago Symphony, but more likely you're learning skills that could take you there or could take you a million other places, and that are really valuable. And that's why you're doing it, not just for that one job, but because you're learning how the world works and how to think, how to negotiate, how to survive. I think it's extremely valuable that way. So that's a very practical answer. And on the other side is just art. Jim Cregan, the bass player in Bare Naked Ladies, started out at U of T as a classical double bass player. He's a great bass player. And he talked with me and with my son, Wesley, who's also a bass player, about the division between art and craft. And he said, music schools, especially when it comes to orchestral instruments, tend to focus on craft. It's all about learning how to do that, how to make that sound, how to be reliably, rhythmically precise, intonation. This is all really super important. It's the language of creating music, but it's not art. I mean, it can be art, can be used for art, but it's not by itself art, it's craft. And there aren't that many music schools, at least in my experience, maybe I'm wrong, I think this may be changing, that try to teach you what it is to make art. And the few courses that I took in the schools that I went to that did focus on that have been extremely valuable. That I think about those lessons again and again and again. So that's the other value of music education is learning the distinction between craft and art, and how they are both important and equal in their partnership.
I'm curious, what classes did you take that focused more on the art than the craft?
Oh, that's good. I was actually, as I was saying that, I was remembering them. I mean, when I think of the classes, it's interesting, isn't it? When you finish degrees or more than one degree, there are classes that you can't remember to save your life, and then there are a few that never leave you. So one was a North American literature class at Marianopolis College. James, I can't remember I'm embarrassed to say, I forget the teacher's last name, James. He was this super smart, slightly cynical writer, and he demanded articulate, succinct explanations, not in a terrifying way, but in an empowering way. Like he would not accept half-assed answers, and he would call you on it. But it was thrilling. So that was great. That was just about thinking. At Yale, there were two classes that I remember really clearly. Joan Panetti taught a musicianship class, which was ear-training, harmony, but it was also performance. Like we listened to recordings and we talk about why they were thrilling. And inevitably, you almost can't help but come down to the fact this great performance of Radu Lupu and Marie Pariah, I think it is, playing the Mozart D major 2 piano sonata. It's not great because they're playing all the notes. It's not great because they're in time. It's great because it's great, because it's living art. And similar, Martin Bresnik, the composer, taught a composition for performers class, which was tremendously freeing, because the first assignment, I think it was the first assignment, was to create something that we would perform, but not on our instrument. So we had to sing, or we had to do something that was art, but that had nothing to do with craft. So he basically removed craft from the equation and forced us to see that we could create art, even in the way that we didn't know. So those are a few that stay with me that way.
Thank you. If I may, one of my examples of art versus craft was I had one teacher who in studio class, he just walked in. I think he was kind of in a bit of a mood. And he walked in and he said, I don't care how well you play your pieces today. If anyone gets up here and does not say something through their music and say something that's authentic, I'm walking out the door. And after the first 10 seconds of this poor first year playing, he walked out the door. But quite frankly, it was the most powerful lesson we could have had, because it really showed him it doesn't matter how well you can play your concerto, play those notes, if you're not actually saying something that's artistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This reminds me, I think of, I didn't take this class, just Lori did at U of T. I don't remember the name of the teacher, but she's told me that she had a theory teacher who started every class by playing the Bach C major prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier. That's what he did. It took 2 minutes. And it is this tremendous example of something simple, but astoundingly complex and beautiful, and craft, but art, and that just to be sort of bathed in that every day or every week, whenever the class was, I thought it was a really brilliant reminder.
Speaking of saying something, one of the things I know I prioritize a lot with my students is speaking to audiences, because that's one thing in school we're taught, again, like you say, this craft of playing the instrument, but at the end of the day, it's very self-focused. It's not focused on what is the audience experiencing, what is music communicating, how are we connecting with people through music, and as a result, a lot of people end up quite scared of speaking in public, which is, a whole other fear that people might have anyway, but we have to practice it. So what I want to ask you, and what I know a lot of people would be curious about, is when you tell stories and you're trying to engage with people in a genuine way, what do you prioritize? Like what bits of information do you prioritize over others? Because lots of assignments will say, talk about when this composer was born or died, or whether there's rhythmic ostinatos, all these words that no one even knows what they mean, right? It's like, how do you express it in a way that brings people into the experience and makes them feel like a part of it, as opposed to just an outsider?
Right. Okay. Well, so if I don't play the piano. Well, I mean, I can fool around, but I don't really play the piano. If I did, that would be one way to talk about music and have it work. So my rule is, if you're going to talk about the technicality of music, about a rhythmic pattern or a harmonic shift or a melody, you have to demonstrate it.
Right.
And because people will hear it, but they need it taken apart for them in very digestible little morsels. So that's, if you're going to talk about why a piece of music does something or what's significant about it, and if it's about the music itself, you have to illustrate it, or it will mean nothing to people that don't speak that language. It even means nothing to people that do, honestly.
Yeah, or it just makes people feel like they're not smart enough to be sitting in the
Yeah.
concert hall because they don't have the knowledge, which is the worst. That's you're alienating people.
Yeah, if you think about going to we were joking about the Super Bowl earlier. I mean, if you don't know anything about football and you hear a bunch of people talking about football,
Yeah.
it's just blah, blah, blah. It's like the teacher on the Peanuts cartoons. It's nothing, and it's not only nothing. It's alienating. So whatever it is, as soon as you're using jargon of any kind, then that's gone. So what does that leave? It leaves a description of emotion But that's tricky because I don't want to tell you what to feel. You're the audience, you're going to feel what you feel, and it's way better for the audience to be able to discover that themselves. So therefore, a story of some kind, a story of why this piece was written at this time. What is it about the way this piece landed when it was created, or something entirely goofy. I mean, we're doing a whole show right now because some years ago, decades ago, I read that J.S. Bach walked 400 kilometers when he was 20 years old, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I don't know anybody else that's done that. So that's the kind of little image that stays, and you can build a narrative around that. But then the important thing to realize is that the narrative you're building has to lead into whatever this piece is. It has to be created so that the music is the payoff. The music is what you're aiming to, and also it has to be its own thing. It has to have an arc, a beginning, middle, end, a conflict and resolution. It has to have all those things that a great piece of music has to have. So it's like you're writing a prelude to a fugue. That you have to create something that will complement the thing that you're showcasing.
How much of yourself do you put into that though? Like when you think about, somebody like Taylor Swift, so much of her music, she wrote herself. It's about a personal experience. She shares that experience. People connect with that. But we're playing music more often written by other people, and B, sometimes playing totally abstract music that has no necessary narrative to it.
Right.
At what point do you say, okay, this is what I'm bringing it to it as a performer versus this is just what the music is saying? Or do you?
So that's an interesting example because Taylor Swift, it's true, her songs are all very personal, but she doesn't introduce them from a personal point of view. I don't think she ever says, this is the song about that guy that broke my heart. This is about when John Mayer was saying mean things about me on Twitter or whatever it was. She doesn't do that, right? They exist as their own little thing. And the way she introduces them, like I saw a clip of this show that she's touring now. It's fantastic. Like there's huge screen and dancers, and she emerges out of the stage. This sort of magically appears. So she's telling a story for her audience, but none of it is in words.
Right.
I guess maybe in part because the songs are so much about her that it would be overkill. So in terms of yourself, it really depends. If there's something about this piece that really affects you, then you can tell that story.
Right.
You can talk about when you first heard it. You can talk about, I remember we did a thing with a singer who talked about driving to the cottage when she was a kid. They had a family cottage, and her mom would put on opera recordings in the car. So that's what the sound of Renee Fleming or whoever it was, Mozart, it meant to her going to the cottage. And the way she described it, you can picture the little kid with the seat. So, they're so small that the seat is above the top of their head, and they're looking out the window and seeing the trees go by, and all these things came from this piece of music that had nothing to do with that piece of music, but it created this atmosphere and this feeling that was completely inviting. So I think you put as much of yourself into it as you can or as fits.
Right.
There's a great story about the composer, then you can tell that, or not. It really doesn't matter. It's interesting. It's a separate thing. It just has to have all the same qualities as the music you're introducing.
Right. And I think that's beautiful. It's a beautiful answer that I know will help a lot of people who are attending understand how better to prep the audience for the music, because that's a hard thing to do. It's a skill that we aren't really taught, and it came to you naturally, but I think for a lot of people, it does.
Yeah. And just the other, back to the music school education thing, we're taught in, well, and I don't want to blame music history teachers, they have a job to do, but the impression is that you're supposed to give this sort of blow by blow history of where this came from and how music evolved this way and that, and that's just not, it doesn't work, and it's not necessary. In fact, it's negative. It's better just to tell a story.
100% agree.
I'm just gonna follow up with a quick question, since we're talking about connection with audiences, and we're all aware kind of how in the past decades the many things have changed with like the internet, let's say 24 years ago, etc., right? So given the different channels by which audiences can kind of interact with music and the different new tools even that we have at our disposal, whether listener or creator. What do you see as the biggest changes in the music industry versus when you were a student yourself?
Okay, so the music industry.
Or even as we can say music industry and then
Yeah.
part B. Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
So on a very practical level, there used to be a lot more work that paid immediately. So and that doesn't exist. Like you don't get hired for jingles or to play on. Sometimes you get hired to play on pop recordings. That happens. There are more opportunities to promote your music. So there are more platforms available. It's much cheaper to make a recording in the early 1990s. Insanely expensive. Now it's like free, really, which is kind of amazing. And there are channels that you can use to distribute and share and promote your music, but you don't get paid if they play it on Spotify, not effectively. So it's in the midst of a change that I don't think is done yet, and it's enormous. The one thing that hasn't changed is the audience has, whether they acknowledge it or not, a giant appetite for music. Like we've come to take music for granted, and I think that is both a negative. It's a downside, but it's also a positive because as people who can provide live music, you have a tremendous insider understanding, and a lone cellist can accomplish a tremendous amount with an audience that has heard this sound and has no idea anything about it. And if you think of yourself as someone that's in a position to share and welcome and invite people into the musical world that you have, then there is a real appetite for that.
Oh,
But it's changed a lot. And I have to say also the CBC, used in Canada, CBC used to pay for recordings, and we don't anymore. There's no budget. It's very hard. On the show that I host, we play lots and lots of new recordings. So send us your recordings. If we like them, we'll play them. That's not true for every show. So we're doing what we can, but the amount of money that governments used to spend on supporting the beginning of musical careers, it's not happening anymore. So there have to be other ways. And there always are. There's money out there. We're still an extremely wealthy society. Life in Canada is pretty darn good. And there are a lot of people who have lots of money who like music. So go and find them. And talk to them. Tell them why your music is worth supporting and get their help.
No, thank you so much for that. I'm just curious as a little follow-up, if you wouldn't mind even expanding a little bit on the part of taking music for granted, why that might be, and if that has to do with some of the changes, and maybe because there's just so much of it around with so much streaming and just accessibility to it.
It is confounding. It's happened so fast. I think honestly, like I'm 62, I'm almost 63. This has happened so quickly in my life that I'm still kind of trying to figure out how we let that go, how it went so quickly, but it did. And a lot of people, saw it happening and were calling distress signals, but nobody was able to stop it. So it's just one of those things that's happened. Our way of distributing and consuming music and visual content has radically changed. And the result now is that people don't expect to pay for music. So I don't think it's true that if you were to say, I'm a cellist or I'm a flutist or I'm a violinist and I play music for live events and I have a show that I can do, I don't think anybody's going to, well, somebody might, but very few people would expect you to do that for nothing. I think you have to build structures by which you showcase that. And you have to teach people that it's worthwhile to invest in that. I mean, house concerts are a thing that were not happening when I was younger and are now. I mean, Rory McLeod, I know, is one of the panelists, has this wonderful thing. People love house concerts. And if you can play your music with a duo or a trio for 25 or 30 people, and and they pay a decent fee to hear your music, you can do pretty well. You can be playing all the time, and you never have the feeling that what you're doing is just a cog in the wheel that some other violinist could fill in, or that, you know, no one wants you to do anything but just play those notes and go home and don't talk about how the orchestra works. You know, there's none of that. You're valued and you connect with people. And there are a lot of the average city in Canada has lots of houses. You know, there are lots and lots of places you can sell that. And you'd be surprised how many people are willing to pay 30 or 40 bucks to spend an evening with good music. You know, I think there's nothing wrong with that.
No, thanks so much for your 2 cents on that. Much appreciated.
I have one last question before I think Lara might ask you the same 2 questions that she's asked all the other panelists. But I just want to touch on, we were just talking about programming, and particularly, you know, what you play as part of your CBC shows, and how you choose. And I do want to say that as a millennial who you know, doesn't listen to the radio all the time, but frankly, I do listen to your show as often as I can, and partially because it is a playlist that I have not generated myself. And so I learn something new from your show every single time I hear it. And that's not to say that all the music you play is music I've never heard before, but I think that is a huge asset. And whenever people ask me, well, how can I develop an appreciation for music? I say, well, listen to Tom Allen's About Time, and then come talk to me.
Thank
And I'm
you.
not just saying that, Tom. It's because you choose music that I think is very representative of what's interesting within the realm of not just Western art music, but, you know, where those where that bleeds into other musical genres as well. And so I guess my question for you is, I love your show because of that. How do you do that? How do you, like, what is it? I know you've got a great producer with Isaac Page. I know you've got a great team, but at the end of the day, you're the one introducing these pieces, these works, these composers, and you seem to really feel like it's an authentic, you know, version of who you want to be as a broadcaster. At least, you know, you fake that well if it's not true. But like, but how do you choose what to program on your shows?
Wow. Okay. So I'm glad you mentioned Isaac, because you know, Isaac Page is 27, 26, 27, and we've been working together for about a year and a half. And he's just a tremendous gift. Now, before him, Alison Howard, who was 63 like me, or 62 when she retired, also was wondrous to work for. So I don't want to, you know, say it's only started with Isaac, but we've built a culture between us where we're ambitious about finding new music and balancing it with existing music. So putting a show, an hour of music together, is balancing a whole bunch of different priorities, new stuff, familiar stuff. There's we used to call the David Amer rule. David Amer was a wonderful music producer at CBC. His rule was you have to be able to sing along with every third piece you play. So if you give people something they can sing along with, then you can go to town for the first two, as long as the third one is, you know, brings them back to a sense of comfort. And the other thing to learn is that, you know, the war horses, or the things that have been played, the cliches, they're usually pretty good. Like, you know, the familiar stuff, if it's balanced by something brand new, and then you hear Beethoven's Fifth, there's something there that says, wow, you know, it's good for a reason. There's a reason we listen to it again and again. So those are some of the thoughts. And also that you don't have to like everything. You know, if it's part of a story, it's the same thing. If it's part of a story, then you can get away with almost anything. In the same way that you know, Stanley Kubrick programmed Ligeti in 2001, which is whatever, 1970. When was that? 71 or something? I was too young to really appreciate it, but still, when I look back on that, that was the kind of music that people ran from the concert hall. These traditional music people were so scared by that atonal, dissonant music. And here it was the perfect thing for that moment in the film. And those same people who would run from the concert hall were just gobbling it up in the movies. So a story goes a really long way to hold things together.
I love that. We're gonna get to the audience Q&A because we got a couple of really good questions in there. But before we do that, in, the purpose of this conference was very much to normalize as many career paths in music as possible. Because certainly when we were in school, that was not available to us. And we all struggled with this idea of like, what is success in life? What is success in music? So the two questions we've been asking everybody, and then what we're dying to hear from you. The first one is, why are you in the music industry? What drives you? What makes you want to be a musician, storyteller? And the second question is, what is your current definition of success in music and in life? And is it different from 18-year-old Tom's definition?
Okay. So why am I in the music? Why does music matter to me? It moves me, I guess. I mean, it's to be part of something that is emotionally thrilling is a tremendous feeling. There are a few sort of deeply rewarding feelings. One is seeing something concrete come from something you imagined. So the very first radio show, Jeff Riley and I put together this goofy radio show in Nova Scotia at the very beginning of my career, and we created a whole fictional world of this coffee shop. And so at the end, there was a tiny budget. We made coffee mugs from Eddie's Cafe, this place I'd invented. And I'll never forget the feeling of going down to this little shop in Nova Scotia in Halifax and opening the box and seeing this thing. It was just a stupid mug, but it was something that I dreamt,
Yeah.
and then there it was. It existed. It was real. It's the same. You're creating a piece of music, writing an arrangement, putting a program together, something that comes from your imagination and your wandering ambition, that if it can become something concrete and then you get to do that, oh my God, there's nothing so satisfying. It's true. And then especially if you can share it with people and they appreciate it, that's what I want to do. That's why I do music and stories. To build something and share it.
That's beautiful. And that's beautiful that you still have that love and that joy after.
Yeah, I'm
such a huge
really
career.
lucky. I feel really, really lucky to be able to still do that and do it more and more. And so what a different success. Yes, a giant change. 18-year-old me, as I said, only considered success playing bass trombone in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So,
Right.
which, I never would have won. And if I had, I mean, I don't want to be, revisionist about it, because Murray Crew, my colleague who died, he came pretty close to that. He was that kind of bass trombonist. And I'm sure he would have been just thrilled to bits to play that job, as he was in the Pittsburgh Symphony, the job he had. But that wasn't me. And even if I'd won that job, I probably would not have been really happy. There are not enough plates to spin. So success, I think, is pretty much back to the answer I gave earlier. Success is making things and being able to share them, and making a living enough to live well. That's if you can do that, that's pretty darn good.
I agree. And to have that balance of still being able to do the other things in your life that you love and not necessarily moving to the middle of nowhere for a particular job because that's the only thing you think you can do.
Right. And sometimes making things and sharing them is, making a cake or or building something in the workshop or whatever. I mean, I know a guy in New York when I lived there who played bass trombone in the chorus line, which the show went on for, I don't know, like 14 years or something. And he was a carpenter. His creative life was doing cabinetry. And then at night he went and played trombone in the show, which he loved, but
Right.
it was an interesting take on where's creativity and, what's craft and what's art.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to pivot to a couple of audience questions. If anybody has any more they want to submit, now is the time in our last 10 minutes. We have a great question from Anna Maria. She says, as performers in our own concerts, how can we create a balance between giving an introduction and giving space to the audience to let the music speak to them? How do you know when it's too much speaking?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Wow.
Excellent question.
The way you know is you talk too long, too many times. And it was Garrison Keillor who said, you get up and tell a story, people laugh, and then you tell a little more and they're enjoying it. And then suddenly you're brought to attention by the sound of people reaching for their keys. So there isn't an easy answer to that. We used to call it missing the exit. If you're telling a story, it's like you're driving on the highway and you're seeing, okay, I'm getting there and getting there. Here comes the exit and I got it. Sometimes an idea comes to you, and you think, oh, I'll just go, and then it's half an hour before the next exit, and that's a problem. So yeah, you need to practice it. I would say, really, like anything else, practice. Tell the story that you think is going to work. Get your friends, your family members, your neighbors, people you don't know. If you're at a restaurant or something, and there's somebody at the neighboring table, say, I'm a musician and I've got this concert. I really want to know if the thing that I'm going to say is going to be interesting. Can I try it out on you? Some people will say no. Most people will say yes, and it
Right.
gives you a chance. And it should be 2 minutes is a really long time. You can if you have nothing to say, 2 minutes is eternity.
Yeah.
And if you have something to say, 2 minutes goes by in an instant. But you can do a lot with 2 minutes. So 2 or 3 minutes should be the maximum. You should give yourself that, and then find within that how much material you really have. Your content will determine how far it can go. And if you find yourself sort of saying things that are empty, then you've run out of material and it's time to take the exit quick.
Or if you're trying it out on somebody and they're 2 feet away from you, it's really easy to see their eyes glow.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. Well, and there's a very important thing too in there. Lori, so I thought of this because Lori, my wife, I try all my stories out on her, and she's really good about saying, wait, stop. No, what was that? Because if you're in the middle of a story and you say something, some words, a bit of jargon, something that is confusing, it's not written down. They can't go back to the beginning and try it again. It's gone. And they will not hear anything else you say for the rest of that.
Right.
So it's got to be really clear and easy to digest and divided into clear thoughts. So practice it on people. And if they get bored or they get confused, don't get mad at them. They're right.
Right. That's fantastic advice. I have another question here from Cecilia. She's asking how your musical background helped you in both radio and as a storyteller. And I wonder too, if you can elaborate a little bit. Are there, things you learned in your music degree that you didn't even know had been helping you with those other jobs?
That's a good point. I mean, the things we said before, which are kind of obvious, just diligence. Learning to play a musical instrument there aren't too many things that are that demanding, that have that level of polish and precision demanded on a daily basis. So learning that standard of excellence is really helpful. And then there's the arc of a story. It's like a little melody. It's the same thing we were just talking about. You develop a sense of that, which is the same as a sense of melody. We have this kind of sense of timing of what's supposed to happen next. I think that's both musical and narrative and literary.
Yeah, absolutely. Very transferable. We'll ask one more. Again, if you have any last thoughts, questions for Tom, you got 5 minutes to get them in. There is a question here. So, what advice do you have for somebody who can compose already on piano but doesn't have a music degree? Do you need a degree or to be part of a music program? Or are there other pathways to just learn to write?
Well, that's a great question. No, you don't need a music degree. Not at all. Nobody cares. That's if you can write music and you can sell what you write, then nobody who's in the position of buying your music, whether it's a film or a concert society or a chamber group, they don't care where you went to school. But what a music school does give you is contact and community. And that is really valuable. And it also gives you competition. If you're among a group of other pianist composers and they're all going to music school, that some of them will be your friends, some will be your rivals, but you will learn from all of those, and they will move forward with you. So if it isn't a music school, it's something else. If you decide that you don't want to bother with music school, then I would find some other way to build community and to build a structure around you that will not let you get away with your tricks, because we all have our easy tricks, right? We all want to take the easy way out, whether we know it or not. And if you're with a competitive peer group, then they'll say, you did that last time. You don't need to do that.
Right.
And that's really important. So that's one thing that a music school does, is it creates a very high standard of competitive and collaborative peer group. that will keep you honest.
Well, and it requires you to be very open to feedback, right?
Yes.
Which I imagine you must get a lot too as a public personality.
Yeah. I mean, when I first came to Toronto after I worked in the Maritimes for 2.5 years at the start of my career, but the producer that I worked with, Nancy Watson, brilliant producer, ruthless. And I would write these essays. I'd write this piece that I was going to tell on the show, and I was, this is great. Oh, it's just so good. I handed it to Nancy, which was really like that. It was like handing it into the teacher, and it would come back 5 minutes later, like covered in red ink. And I was like, oh, you're kidding. That sentence? That was such a good sentence. I worked on that so long, So you learn over time that stuff. That's the other good thing about it. I mean, it's the same as a concert career. A radio show is a kind of a blessing because there's always another show. So
Right.
you do it, you work really hard at it, and then it's gone. And then you got to do another one. Same as concert programs. So yes, you want to throw your whole life into it, but you know what? Tomorrow there'll be another one, and it'll probably be better, and just keep going.
I love that. You just have to keep going. I think that's amazing advice.
Yeah.
I'm going to squeeze in one more because now we of course have like 5 that just came in the last 10 seconds. Florence asks, and I think this is a great question for you, Tom, because you're such a passionate guy. How do I rekindle my passion in music after failures and burnout?
Whoa, wow. Well, I think it comes to why are you doing it? Because that's what happened to me. I really did completely flame out, but I still loved music. And maybe ask yourself, what is it about music you love? What is it about working with music that makes you passionate? It may not be the thing that you thought it was. It may not be, learning to play music the way you were working at. It may be something else. But guaranteed there's something in there that will light your heart afire. And it doesn't have to be the thing that you thought it was. Failing that, also you can take on a new challenge. There's something there's something here that I wanted to say, which is not quite an answer to this question. It could sort of be, but I remember years ago on one of our chamber musical tours, it was me and Laurie and Kevin Fox, who's a cellist and singer-songwriter and guitarist, and Patricia O'Callaghan, classically trained singer, and Bryce Kulak, who's a actor and piano player and songwriter. And we talked about the beginning of our careers, and each of us had a kind of an ensemble project of some kind or another that we built up on our own, usually in our 20s to early 30s. None of those ensembles went anywhere. They all died, but they taught us things that we all used to this day. So Trish was an opera company. They did modern opera. Laurie was a women's musical collective. And me was the brass quintet. And we had to build these things up from the ground up and learn every aspect of how to make them work. And in the process, we found passion. We found what worked, and we enabled ourselves to realize we could do this, even if that thing didn't end up going anywhere or lasting. The process of building it from nothing together was deeply instructive and lasted, to a person right through our careers. So that's another way to rekindle passion, is find a collaborator, find someone who needs what you have and that you need what they have, and you can build something together.
Absolutely. I think that artistic ownership and sort of creative agency can be a really great way to find that love again, because lots of times we find ourselves in situations where someone else is hiring us and telling us what to play, which is great. But we don't always have that agency. So
right. There's kind of a balance there that I've talked about with my kids a lot, because my older kids are both artists. There are things you do that are very creatively satisfying that usually don't pay very much. And there are things you do that are less creatively satisfying but pay more. And the ideal is to get both of those ends of the spectrum to be enjoyable. If you're paid well and the thing you do is satisfying enough that it allows you to do the whole other thing that's really creatively great and doesn't pay as much but keeps your heart alive, that's pretty good. So most of us have to make that kind of a balance somewhere.
Right. Well, those are beautiful words to end on. Tom, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I can see from the chat that people have really been moved and have appreciated what you said. So thank you for being here. For everybody who is interested, we do have our virtual meet and greet starting in, I mean, it technically started a minute ago, I guess. We'll have a selection of our panelists from today there if you want to come. It's a meeting format, so your camera and sound will be on. You'll have a chance to chat. You can bring a drink and a snack. And I also want to take this moment to just thank my wonderful co-hosts, Amy and Cindy, for all the work that they put into this project. We've enjoyed every moment, so we hope that you have too. And a lot of this will be available to watch for the next few weeks on YouTube. We'll be sending out information via the webinar emails soon about that. Amy,
Thank you
any
so
last
much,
thoughts?
Tom.
Thank you.
I just
Thank
want
you.
to
And
say a
Thank
big
you,
thank
Tom.
you.
yeah, and congratulations again. I'll speak for everybody because this is the last panel. Lara and Amy and Cindy, this is a wonderful thing that you did. And it obviously the response tells you how valuable it is. I have no doubt it will happen again and will be even more well received. So congratulations. It was a really great thing.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Cheers,
Bye.
everybody.
Have a good night.
Great night. We'll see you at the meet and greet.